Hi everyone, so welcome back. Before we get started, if you could please listen closely to what I'm about to say. So for part B, it's the lesson plan, where we start planning out what we need to do, what the students are going to be performing, what us educators are going to be performing, what's going to happen, do we have assessments, are they informal or formal assessments, etc. So as I mentioned before in my first video, I am part of Cal State Teach, and for me, the CalTPA Part B was different. I had to do the Cal State Teach template. I did not have to do the CalTPA template because there's two templates. So my template is different, but I'm sure there's going to be some of you maybe watching my video that are from Cal State Teach. So maybe you could follow what I did. But if you're not from Cal State Teach, you can still watch this video and gain information. I'm sure it's similar questions. They're asking us what to do. What are we teachers going to do? It's asking us to provide examples of how we're going to start an introduction, etc. So that's something that you need to keep in mind, that my template is different from yours. So now let's get started. So this is my Cal State Teach template. This is how it looks, and my information is on here so you can get an idea. So for the first section, it's contextual/grade level, and then we have to summarize that contextual information about our students, such as English language proficiency, cultural background, trends of knowledge, interests, reading level, developmental, learning, or behavior needs. So I talked about my students, the age range, the total number of students that I have. I talked about how the majority of my students are standard learners, and just 7 of them are EL learners. Then I talked about the breakdown of my students' race. So 1 is Asian, 15 are Hispanic, and 7 are Caucasian descent, etc. And then I mentioned how all of these students are U.S. citizens. And then if we continue going, I talked about how regarding their culture, they're very comfortable with working with each other, although they're not all from the same race. They're all very friendly and all that. So they all get along perfectly. They all like to collaborate. Although there's some students who are shy, so that might be a behavior need. That's why I put it under. Some students are shy. This affects them because when we call them out to read, they get nervous, etc. So then I talked about how the majority of my class is at their grade level or higher in reading, but about 6 of them are in grade level 2. My English learners also enjoy reading, and I talked about my students who need additional support. So I'm not going to say the name, but if you could see right there, I say she is a very smart girl, but she wants someone by herself at all times. So that's one of my students. That's my focus student 3 right there. So just a breakdown of your class. How's everyone? How are they doing? Where are they struggling? What are the students' interests? Their grade level, etc. Then we continue to the second box. It talks about standards, and that one you just copy and paste it from wherever you got your standards. And mine was operation and algebraic thinking, to represent and solve problems involving multiplication and division. And then if we move on, it's EOD standard. Mine is part 1, interacting in meaningful ways. Section A, collaborative, exchanging information and ideas with others through collaborative discussions on a range of social and academic topics. And then part B was interpretive, listening actively to spoken English in a range of social and academic contexts. So when it comes to EOD standards, you have to be very specific. You have to understand what goes along with your standard, because that's where a lot of students struggle with writing their ELD standards. Some of them don't write it properly. If you write it incorrectly, you also get points deducted by that. But most importantly, it has to tie with your standard you chose. And like throughout your lesson, it just has to match whatever you write in your ELD standard. That's what you have to perform once you teach your lesson. So for example, I put collaborative, and if you can see, number 1 talks about how exchanging information and ideas with others through oral collaborative discussions. And then if we move on right here, I'm going to go ahead a little bit. I talked about how I will incorporate think, pair, and share in my lesson. That's collaborative because we're thinking, we're pair sharing. So you have to make it connect to what you're going to do throughout your lesson once you're talking about your EOD standard. And then interpreted, so they're listening actively to spoken English. And that is shown throughout my lesson by me providing a PowerPoint presentation throughout my lesson and, them listening actively to me. So that's how that's shown throughout my lesson because they're listening actively to my presentation, to my questions, they're answering my questions. So that's how listening actively is shown throughout my lesson. So then if we move on to our objective. So what is your objective? What are you going to do? What's going to happen? So that's pretty easy, just what's the main focus of your lesson? So mine was students will be able to represent multiplication and division problems using a variety of strategies such as equal groups, arrays, number lines, and repeated addition. So then if we go down to our EOD goal, that's for my English learners. This right here is for my English learners. And this is also very important because we have to show this throughout our lesson. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. So I talked about how English learners will demonstrate active listening to an oral presentation as they exchange information and answer basic questions in a collaborative group setting while using sentence phrases to support the conversation. And again, if we go down right here, I'm going to go down right here. This is where they're collaborating in the think, pair, and share. But then, again, my lesson plan is different. The template I'm using is different because this is from Cal State Teach. But then if we go right here, under adaptions, you'll be able to see. Sorry about that. So, under adaptions, for focus student 2, I talk about how I'll be incorporating sentence frames. So, as you could see, that's what I showed here in my EOD goal, sentence frames. So that is shown down here, sentence frame, and then he is able to participate in the think, pair, and share without a problem. So this student is going to be using sentence frames and collaborating. And this is my EO learner. So, yeah. So then if we move on, just academic vocabulary, what's, the main words that we're going to be focusing on. And then our observation focus, which one am I using? And I'm using critical thinking. Since I want my students to deepen their thinking by me challenging them with the questions I provide for them. Communication and collaboration is also used throughout my lesson. And then this section for me is for YouTube videos or any type of videos that I'm using. That if I were to use in my lesson would go right there, the link. So like the graders could, get a view of it too. So then this section right here, if you could see, reads engage/open. So that section just shows the beginning, and then if we go right here, it says practice/body, and then evaluate/close, and then rationale. So then I talk about my anticipatory set. So during the opening of my lesson, I will connect students to prior knowledge, and I describe what I'm going to do. I also describe the example that I'm going to be providing. So you have to be very, very specific when you're writing these lesson plans because they want to know what you're going to do. They want to know what the students are going to do. So, yeah, you could provide something. You're just going to say, students are going to read chapters 1 through 2. Okay, but what are they going to read? What book? For how long are they going to read those chapters? So we have to be very specific once we're writing our lesson plan. So just be as detailed as you can. And then I'm going to state my objective again. And then positive learning environment. Because if you know one of the lesson annotations, one of the annotations talks about positive learning environment. So, and for me, it's already asking for it right here in my lesson plan. And if you know, positive learning environment could be shown in different ways. But the way I am going to be establishing positive learning environment is by boosting our class energy while we read our class mantra as a class. So for example, you could also demonstrate positive learning environment by, congratulating or saying good job after them answering a good question, or by calling them by their names. That's showing positive learning environment. So for example, instead of saying, oh, partner A, what did you tell your partner B? No, you could be like, oh, Liz, what did you mention about aliens to your partner Diego? So mentioning the names is positive learning environment. Or thanking them for their response. Oh, thank you for participating. All those little things are positive learning environment. And that's what I use throughout my lesson. And then if we go down here for the input, I talked about during the body of my paragraph, how was I going to start that section, the guided practice, and I talked about higher order thinking questions, and how I plan on engaging our students into higher order thinking by allowing them to be creative. I want them to, design and build math problems using manipulatives. So this right here is very, very beneficial. And I feel like this right here, sorry about that. Let me go back. And I feel like this right here is like one of the main things that could catch one of our graders' attention, because not only is this higher order thinking, we're allowing them to design, we're allowing them to be creative, we're allowing them to, have physical interaction with certain things, which in this case are manipulatives. If you know, these are, I talked about the Unifix cubes. I'm sure we all know what Unifix cubes are, right? And I talked about how my students are going to be asked the question, why do we have 3 groups of 4 for 3 times x and not 4 groups of 3? And they could show me this question. Why is it that 3 times 4 is 3 groups of 4 and not 4 groups of 3? They're able to take the Unifix cubes apart and make 3 groups of 4 and all that. And then if we go to independent practice, I talked about what the independent practice was, the closure, how am I going to close it. And then if we go down, I don't think you guys have to mention anything about anchored competencies. We did, but I don't know about you guys. But then if we go down here under adaptions, this is where we talk about our focus students. Focus student 1, English learner. Focus student 2, a student with IEP. Focus student 3, a student with current life experiences that she's going through, who needs additional support. And talk about their adaptions. Adaptions are, what are you going to do different? What are you going to provide for these students that you're not going to provide for the other class? Or you could also provide it for them. What is going to be happening? And where throughout your lesson is it going to be happening? In the beginning, in the middle, or in the end? So you have to be very specific. Talk about why you're going to be providing that. How is it going to be beneficial for him or her? So then if we go on, it talks about technology. How will you and your students use technology to engage with the content? And then, as I mentioned earlier, I had a Google Slides presentation. So that's a source of technology because, they're interacting with me and with the slides. So I talked about Google Slides, and then towards the end of my lesson, I'm going to use quizzes. And then if we go to assessments, what type of assessments am I going to be having? Formative or summative assessments. And I talked about what's going to be on the assessments. How is this going to be beneficial? How is this going to challenge my students? And that's going to be applied to the same thing. What type of assessment is happening in the beginning, middle, and end of my lesson. And then the last box, why did you select these assessments. Just talk about them. Why are they going to be beneficial? How is this going to promote growth in your students? Just the why. It's simple. And then the reflection and application, that's after we teach our lesson, so that's why I don't have anything on there. And yeah, so that's like the end of my part B lesson plan. And again, my lesson plan is different than yours because mine is from Cal State Teach, and maybe most of you are gonna just do the regular one, but I'm sure it's the same thing. It's gonna ask for the grade level, EOD goal, academic vocabulary, observation, etc. So yeah, that's the end of this video. Thank you.